In this video, I'm going to show you some tips that you can use if you have a dog that doesn't like having guests come over. This is Jordy, a 2.5-year-old Australian Shepherd who's been in his home for about a year. He likes to bark at people who come to visit, especially if they get up and move suddenly. I've arranged and set him up for success. I have a treat trail leading from the front door, and you're going to see Jordy grabbing some treats on the ground here in a second. Now, as your dog comes out, if it skips a treat, the guardian should stop and point it out just like the guardian is right here. I would actually recommend that the guardians practice this a couple times without the guest at the end of the treat trail. At first, I have the treats positioned about an inch apart, about 12 inches apart in a very straight line, so it's easy for the dog to see. Once you get a couple feet away from your house, you can go to about every foot, every 2 feet. When you get closer to the person, I start making the treats closer together about every 12 inches. Now, as you're going to notice, I'm sitting down with my back to the house, and the dog is approaching me from behind and to the side. And I'm sitting down. That's a very relaxing position. And you see, Jordy just saw me for the first time. I'm not trying to pet the dog or interact with the dog. I don't have a lot of big movements. I'm holding still. And the trail of treats, right where you saw me put my hand, I would put a pile of treats there. So when Jordy comes out, there's a whole pile of treats there, and he's happy, in a pretty good mood, because treats are essentially $100 bills for dogs. The guest should hold out after the dog has come and taken Jordy has taken the treats. There's no tension on the leash. His body is nice and relaxed. The guest should hold their hand out to the left with the palm facing the sky with one treat in it, and just hold it out and then call the dog's name. Hopefully Jordy will come over and lick it off their hand. If he won't, the guest could just toss the treat, and if the dog is a little bit stuck, the guest can toss the treat behind the dog. Now I'm going to stand up here in a second. Now, standing up can be jarring for the dog. So what you're going to see is I'm taking a treat. That's how you would offer the treat, like I mentioned. And see how I left my hand there? I want the dog to, a lot of times the dog will come back right there and get a second interaction with me. I'm not putting a second treat there, but I'm just holding still, which is a good thing to do, and the dog comes back and gets to sample me a second time. Notice there's no tension on the leash. The dog's body language is nice and relaxed and comfortable. There's no drooling. Now I'm about to stand up here, and to set this up, if I stand up abruptly, that can cause a dog to react. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some treats and I'm going to toss them. Make sure that Jordy is watching, because you're going to see when I toss, he's not paying attention. He didn't see the treat. So, and if the dog is sniffing, that's what we want. Don't call him away. Don't be impatient. So basically, I have the treats. I'm ready. And as soon as he looks at me, I'm going to go ahead and I toss it. And I tossed it away so that I can move into this position. I don't want to just stand up abruptly. I toss the treat. The dog moves away. I rock myself up into a crouch. And then when I toss a second treat after he recognizes I've moved my position, I toss another treat again. Now I can stand up. And I've got distance between me and the dog. And if at any point the dog has reacted, the best thing to do is move away and increase the distance. Now after this, we're going to go for a short little walk together. Ideally, we'd like to have the dog in between, but if the dog feels more comfortable on the other side, that's totally fine. If the dog is reacting, have the guest walk in the street, or maybe even all the way across the street. Now I'm offering treats here, and if the dog is taking treats in your hands and feels nice and relaxed and comfortable, you could ask the dog to sit, if you're the guest, every once in a while, like I'm about to do. Well, here I'm throwing it there just to get him moving forward. But you're going to see in a second, I'm going to ask him to sit. And remember, if he doesn't sit, it is not an indication he's being disobedient. He's saying, I'm uncomfortable. Use that as an indicator. Don't try to force the issue. So what we're doing is just going for a little short walk, and right there I'm asking for a sit. He sits, I set the marker word, and I gave him a treat. Then we're going to turn around and walk back. As you notice, this does not have to be a super long walk, 2 or 3 houses. Now, if he's uncomfortable, I would go for a longer walk, provided that there's not a lot of craziness on the street. We don't want to have kids running around, motorcycles, people mowing the lawns. Those are things that are going to add some anxiety, and it can potentially put the dog in a position to fail. You might want to also exercise Jordy a little bit before you do this. Just make sure he has 10 minutes of time to recover before the guest arrives from the time the walk concludes. Now, on this walk back, the guest should be dropping treats, or if they can ask the dog to sit, and Jordy does sit, they can ask him to sit. He sits, they say the marker word and give him a treat, and he'll walk a little bit further. We want the dog to practice listening to the human in an environment where there's a lot of distractions, and is very open, so the dog doesn't feel confined and uncomfortable because of the constriction or an enclosed environment. And remember, we're going to let the dog sniff as much as he wants to do so. It drains energy. It helps him feel calm and comfortable. Now you can see I just held up my treat pouch. I would recommend you get some high-value training treats. I'm using chicken liver that have a very strong smell, and put them in that treat pouch and give that treat pouch to your guest. So if every time the guest comes over, the guest is holding this treat pouch full of these deliciously smelling treats, Jordy is going to make a positive association with him. Now, as we come in, because of the layout of this house, you're going to notice that there is a little bit of a confined area here, and that can be a time where a dog might feel a little bit stressed. Now, even though Jordy was giving me treats outside. Once we go inside, that might change. And in an enclosed area like this here, this might change. So you might want to keep a little bit of distance if the dog feels stiff. I asked him to sit as an indicator. Is he comfortable enough to sit? He did. So I felt comfortable enough to give him a treat. I'm going to have the guardian go in first. Now remember, when you go in, you're changing the environment. So have treats in your hand like I have there. And you're going to notice as soon as I come in, the very first thing I do is I hold out the treat, and I'm not asking him to do anything other than just take the treat. We want the leash to be nice and loose. I'm going to ask the guardian, I believe, to take the leash off. I would probably leave the leash on in the future, just so in case something happens. And his body language says he's uncomfortable. Use the leash. It's a tool that we can use. Jordy. This might not be a bad thing for the guest to do 2 or 3 times. It's a nice way to drain a little bit of energy. He has fun engaging with the guest and gets to go down. He gets some treats. Again, he's in a good mood. So what I would do then is I'm going to have you go ahead and come on in, and I'm going to have you stand right there if you could. And I would have your guest sitting across from you. Now, remember, front facing is confrontational for dogs. So what I can do at this point, Jordy, is we talked earlier about consent. So the guest should not be trying to pet him or look at him or talk to him. It should just be very passive. And if he comes to sniff them, they should just remain still and not do anything. If he barks at them, they can show they have a treat and throw the treat away. We could also throw a treat in between us. So if he's barking, what he's trying to do is saying, I'm uncomfortable with this person. I want him to go away. I'm going to bark, because usually that makes things go away. Well, if we do this, we can throw the treat and have him increase the distance on his own. Now, we've also taught him hand targeting. Now, actually, I didn't teach fully hand targeting. We talked about the exercise itself. We didn't talk about the cue. So the most common cues are touch, target, or boop. Do you like any of those words?
Boop.
Boop. Boop. Boop. Nope. Boop. 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 So this is why we don't want to say the word until the dog's got the action. So I was just repeating that. That's making the word eventually irrelevant. So what I would do is I would just go. Nice. Nice. So once you get to the point, once you guys are practiced enough, then they should be able to say boop, and he comes and touches his nose to their hand. Well, what is he doing? He's engaging with the guest, but it's at an arm's length, literally. So he doesn't feel so that he's going to be trapped. And the guest is not chasing him. I mean, the guest is going to look for signs of consent. Jordy? So if the guest gets to the point, sit where they want to interact with him, they should hold out their hand like there. See how he leaned in? He's giving me his consent. I reach away. See how he turned away? That's what I'm saying. I don't want you to pet me. So make sure you pick guests who are going to listen to you. Because a lot of guests are like, but all dogs love me. Why did your dog bite me? Because I asked you not to do it and you did it anyways. So you don't want somebody who's big and boisterous and very flamboyant with their actions, or who's not going to listen to you. You want somebody who's going to pay attention to what you're saying. So again, you can throw the treats, and I would give them like a handful of treats. And I would prefer to use Charlie bears for this sort of thing. Charlie with 2 E's if you're searching for it. And that way you can throw those treats around. Now remember, when he sits or lays down, that's an indication he feels comfortable. So how many moves does he have to go before he can go into a run? So right now it's 1 move. I stand up and I can start running. Well, we could also, does he know how to catch?
Yeah.
Nice. So catching is a wonderful game to play with guests because he can keep whatever distance he needs to. So let's go ahead and move you a little further away. Jordy. What I would do is say nice when he catches it. Nice.
Nice.
It's hard to tell. So when you guys are doing this would be a game I would have you guys do, just to freshen up. Have one of you sitting here, one of you sitting there with Jordy, and then one of you throws the treat, and if he catches it, you say that person does nice. If not, that person grabs the treat and gives it back to the thrower. So the only way I get it is by snatching it out of the air. That gives me more motivation. Eventually he'll snatch flies out of the air for you. Now when you're doing this, the guest, again, I would have the guest sitting in a chair like this across from you, so that way he can, the areas that you guys normally sit in, he feels nice and comfortable. And this is what we like the dog to do, is Jordy come up to the guest this close. But what am I not doing? I'm not petting him. He does not want me to pet him. Right there. He might want to shake, but he doesn't want me to pet him. And so eventually that might take 2 or 3 visits. Remember, what we want to do is we want to end on a positive. So let's say that this guest has to go to use the bathroom. Well, then I could throw a couple treats over there and then get up and go to the bathroom, or you could call him away or take him outside for a potty break while the guest does it. You don't want the guest to make any loud, sudden movements like a sneeze, sometimes harder said than done, or getting up and moving around, because he's going to interpret that as, oh, what is he doing? Now I go back to on duty. So the idea is to keep these visits really short. So try to get your neighbors to help out or people that live nearby, and try to keep the visit to 10, 15 minutes. And end on a good note. So the last memory engram he has is the person come over and it was a good thing. Now we can also get him a lick mat, smear with peanut butter ahead of time so it's ready to go. So the guest maybe throws the treats for a couple minutes and then he plays a little hand targeting. And you could also do hand targeting. You could do a hand target and then the guest can do a hand target. So he's going back and forth, touching his nose to us, and nobody's trying to pet him, or at least the guest isn't. You can also have the guest doing the scent games, or the cookie in the corner, tossing that treat, hunt. And again, the guests come over, it's the best time ever. Get one of those Omega treat balls and load it up with his kibble with some of the tricky trainers in. Give it to your guest throws it on the ground and he rolls it around. Get him lick mats and chew items. Remember, licking and chewing release endorphins. So I would try to reserve those just for when guests come over. So to sum up this whole thing, we set him up for success by getting him a sufficient amount of exercise beforehand. He gets 10 minutes of rest before the guest comes to the door, but the guest is actually going to be on the street. But before this, we should have practiced leaving the trail of treats, leading to that area. So he's done this 5 or 10 times, maybe once a day for every day. So he's just like, every day he comes out there and this is the trail of treats. Oh, and then eventually there's going to be somebody there. Have them park their car and put the trash can or whatever, something, so he doesn't see them when they first come out the door. His proximity is about 10 feet. But it's helpful if he doesn't see anybody there. If he does, it's the worst case. Since he's not reactive, it's not the worst case in the world. Just make sure it's sitting away from him. So then you approach, you do everything we talked about outside, you come back inside, then maybe we throw the treats until he's relaxed. I would throw the treats until he sits or lays down on his own accord. Even if it's across the room, that's an indication I'm feeling more comfortable. When that's the case, then I would maybe have one of you two play a little bit of hand targeting. At this point, you say boop, and he comes over and touches his nose. Do that, and maybe one of you's there, one of you do back and forth, and eventually, boop, and see if he'll come over. If he won't, just have him throw the treat on the ground. And eventually, yeah, you're not going to do it for me on camera, huh? But eventually, we get to the point where he is enjoying the activity because the guest is not trying to pet him. And then basically, so when the guest comes in, they throw the treats. Then you could do a little bit of the hand targeting. They could do a little bit of the cookie in the corner. They could throw treats to him. When your guest is going to leave, you call him away and maybe drop a handful of treats over there, or have him have the lick mat over there and give him maybe the actual liver treats that we had. So throw a handful of those down on the ground. He's looking those up. Your guest gets up and expeditiously leaves. So no long drawn. Say all your goodbyes when he's sitting down. And when the guest gets up, or he or she immediately leaves and closes the door. I want him. The whole idea is the visit. He has the entire visit without any barking or grumbles. And take note of how long that visit was. And next time, try to build like 30 seconds, 1 minute after that, and work your way up to the point where you can have a guest over for like an hour or so. Now, in the middle of it, you might actually take him in the other room and let him lay down on the couch and just relax a little bit. But the idea is just to build a positive association on top of another positive association. So after a while, guests coming over equals the best time ever instead of something I need to be on duty about. Jordy, boop, nice. Well, this is my buddy Jordy. Sit. Nice. And these are some tips that you can use if you have a dog that doesn't always agree with guests who come to visit.